Hey Wargamers, Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and as my Adepticon plans begin to take shape, I wanted to talk about a game that I was very interested in, and that is Witchborn Enter Perdition, and its kind of sub-minigame, Witchborn The Pit. You see, my co-host for The Emperor Protects, Dan Bears, is an awesome guy, and he goes to Adepticon all the time, and he kept telling me on Saturday night there's an event called Witchborn The Pit, you have to be a part of it, okay? And I definitely trust him. We have a lot of the same vibes and flavors when it comes to gaming and why we enjoy this kind of hobby. So I signed up, and at the same time, I reached out to the owner, the guy who runs Witchborn as a company, and then the game master and all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of asked a few questions, and he wanted to send out a copy of Witchborn. And so this is not a paid review. He sent the books, and it's a model-agnostic game with some cool printed materials that I will unpack for you. And I was not expecting what this was. I approached this with almost no information, okay? So what I'm going to be doing now is kind of conveying that to you in case you are someone who is also a bit Witchborn curious. In the era of print-on-demand booklets and indie games being published wide and far on things like, War Games Unlimited, Drive-Thru RPG, that kind of stuff, what I am surprised about is that more people are not talking about Witchborn, because it is the Cadillac of miniature agnostic games. And when I say that, I don't mean to, it's not about like the game mechanics are somehow more like incredible or groundbreaking. We'll get to the mechanics here, but what I mean is when you get this, it is the most abundant amount of well-printed quality paper, like all of it. So like, I don't know, I guess I just feel like when I get some stuff off of print-on-demand services, the paper quality tends to be cheap because that's the whole idea. It's low-cost indie creations, that kind of stuff. They went the other direction. They were like, we're a miniatures agnostic game, so we're going to put all of our quality into the printed materials, and then you bring the quality miniatures. All that to say, I'm blown away by the printed quality of all the things that I got here. And if you and your gaming group are looking for a miniatures game, I was not expecting what came to my door when it was delivered. Essentially, this is when I say it's a miniatures agnostic game, it's like a whole game. Like Age of Sigmar is a game. Like it has complete factions. I think there's 6 of them, and they each have their own, what is an equivalent to a codex or a battle tome inside of there, as well as a pre-made army list, so you can just jump right in if you want some pre-generated characters that have all the math done for you, or you can go the route of building each one of them custom. Somewhat painstakingly, but it works the same way as like Mordheim back in the day did. There's different stats, and I think there's a bit few of them. It's a little bit more intuitive than Mordheim initially was, but it's there. Character creation is there, warband upgrading is there, jump right in with something pre-made is there, and there's like 6 different factions, and everyone can take their little, battle tome equivalent and go home, so your entire gaming group can, with one purchase, go from playing, let's say, either Conquest or D&D, because a lot of people have those miniatures, or something like Age of Sigmar, and everyone gets a complete new game system without having to buy a single model. Now, what is clear from immediately opening the package is that this is a merger between a miniature wargame skirmish game, like say Warcry, Mordheim, Infinity, if you're going with a sci-fi example, and a role-playing game. It functions a lot like some elements of like D&D or Pathfinder or something like that. Part of that is this game is played with an app that it's like a free web app, or you can get it on iOS or Android, and all it does is randomly determine events, objectives, and what's happening for you. This means that when you and a friend sit down to play Witchborn, there is a third party member, not GM, who's throwing in all kinds of Hail Marys and new objectives and dangers and controlling what happens when you get hit with a weapon. If you get wounded, you have to click on the app and it draws a result for you. So you never actually quite know if your strikes are going to be, well, you'll know if they're going to be deadly, but you'll never know quite what the effect is. Likewise, if you swing an attack and roll an oops, you can have something catastrophically go wrong. I tried for a while to do a cool little setup here with my Savage Orcs and stuff, and kind of give you a game demo, but the truth is other content creators on YouTube have done a better job. Specifically, it was like Guerrilla Miniature Gaming way back in the day when the game first launched. It did a great breakdown, a let's play, and on the Perdition site there is a gameplay tutorial which I will link to, so I didn't want to retread ground. But the reason I wanted to highlight this system is 1, I'm partaking in it, 2, I love any kind of indie game that exists, but then 3 is this idea of the event that started this whole thing in the first place, the Pit. The Pit is sort of a much more comical take on the Witchborn, I guess, overall mechanic system. It is essentially a bar fight. And a bar fight, imagine, you know, the famous Red Dragon Inn, like the start of every D&D, you know, campaign that exists. Imagine there was a bar fight there. How does that pan out? And so you use the same mechanics. Maybe you throw a beer at somebody and your accuracy is not up to snuff. You miss, meaning you roll an oops. Now it generates, instead of hitting the target, it hits some nearby patron and they go ballistic, and now you have new enemies into the ring. And so all of these things add up to create a super fun, ridiculous experience that you never know what's going to happen. That is what I am excited for come Adepticon. The whole game system, I'm going to do a full review of the game mechanics and that kind of stuff once I've gone to Adepticon and played it. It's a lot for me to jump into here right before Adepticon, but I will say in terms of its quality and the game universe size, there's a lot happening. So what I'd like to do now is go over to the downward cam. I will unbox the thing for you because when you see what's included, it'll make a lot more sense. So once we talk about the contents, we'll come back here for a game mechanics discussion. And here we are at the downward table. As I'm just gonna throw this out there. This box is way too big for my little setup here. This is mainly for hobbying and hanging, and this thing warrants daggum a massive table. So what I'm gonna be doing, instead of just having the box here and unpacking things like a traditional unboxing, I just want to show you the items that come in the Enter Perdition set because of the quality of them. So I'll be just taking them out of the box, showing you here, and then putting them away. I'm going to make this pretty brief because, quite frankly, I'm not a big unboxing video guy. So the first thing you'll notice is that since this is a miniatures agnostic game, you get a whole bunch of the various sheets. And these, essentially, also within the box is a whole bunch of like little standees. And so if there's ever a situation, whether it is you know, an enemy warband and you have the models you want to use, but you don't have anything for your enemy, your D&D group might have their miniatures and you're looking for some stand-ins, this is what they give you. I'm not the biggest fan of standees, but I understand that for the purposes of this game being model agnostic, they are exceptionally valuable to like fill in the gaps of things you might be missing, as well as the fact that they are these things, like, this is terrain quality, thicker than that level cardboard. Like, this is actually, it's quite nice. And I will say the things that I definitely would still use standees for, even if I wanted to go all miniatures and 3D terrain and stuff like that, some of the things that are not quite objectives, like a horse-drawn wagon, a rowboat, a cart, like I don't have models for those, nor would I probably use them for Age of Sigmar or Warcry or something like that. And so it's nice to have some markers for those. On that same quality of boarding, here we have a whole bunch of objective markers, status tokens, things like that. Here's a few camouflage markers, and they have like real life camo. That's kind of funny. And then moving on to, this is more stuff for the board. So if there are unique characters, like sometimes the AI will control certain characters. The Searcher, he's looking for something and you have to go defend him or kill him. They'll have printed cards here for them, as well as, again, more objective tokens that are mission specific. This one is a stampede that is going around the board trying to kill people, and you randomly determine which direction it's going. Again, it's for a very specific mission. And that's something that's kind of hard to quantify. I don't normally do unboxings, but the reason this is important is because not only does it come with all these great objectives, it comes with a colossal board. This thing, I'll get the exact measurements and I'll try to remember to put them on the screen here. But this is an incredible thing, and this is why I do recommend you go watch the video in the description from the maker of Witchborn when they show you the game being played. It's unique because essentially there are two sides. One of them is a big cityscape, so this is the asylum. Got a wall going around, sort of like a circular city. There's some stuff on the outside, bars and stuff you can hit on the inside. But the overworld, as we're gonna call it, is kind of this rough green, sorry, my camera's having a lot of trouble focusing here, rough green setup. And you'll notice from pictures of the rulebooks and stuff like that, that there are these little numbers scattered all throughout. That's because as the game progresses, the AI, essentially, in this case the DM through the app, has set apart locations for things to happen. So it's going to tell you enemies spawn at, and then give you a number. You have to find that dot, and they are in an order, so it's very easy to find them. But that's how the game creates random events and movements and that kind of stuff. So even though you move with a measuring stick, which I'll show you here in a second, you do move with like inches, but you have to move towards objectives that are randomly generated around the world. These spaces also determine your deployment zone. So like a little square here. It'll have numbers for you on and telling you which one to go to. For example, this is deployment square number 2. Yeah, that's basically that one. I'll cut to some video of the game being played so you can kind of get a sense of what that looks like in practice. Now, these next two things kind of go together. One is sort of a quick reference, but you get a collection of army lists, and I'm going to get to what these are. They're kind of the center stage. These are more reference sheets. So this is essentially, we'll take this one, this is for the Paladins if you can't see. This is essentially, if it were a Games Workshop product, you would call it your Battle Tome or Codex. It has all of the background and lore for your faction, where they come from, what they stand for, why they are fighting. Even though it's Mini-Agnostic, it gives you some, I like the way they do this, being with no minis, they have like these great silhouettes, and I don't know why I love these pieces of art in every single one of these books. Here's the orc one. They look super BA. Like, I don't know, because you're supposed to be able to layer your character in there. I just think it looks absolutely terrific. But back to the task at hand. We're talking lore. There's often a short story. I believe every one of them has it. I'll have to double check that. And then it gives you, like I said, your codex, so it has all your rules. Here's the things that only paladins can do, and they're cool ways of upgrading. And yeah, I don't know, in the demo video that I'm going to be playing, that mission that's in that video, they mentioned characters leveling up pretty aggressively, and so I plan to do that. So yes, it's all the lore, background, skills, gear, model information you need to play the entire faction. Now, what's great about this is they're all printed separately. I'll go through the factions here. There are orcs, paladins, the guild, which look kind of like it's a secret shadowy syndicate. Might be sort of a Skaven type thing. And then we have Norn, which are sort of your men from the north, elves and dwarves. So a lot of classic fantasy tropes here. Each one of these books is self-contained, meaning if you and your friends group buy this box set for $125 or whatever, and you give this to a player, they have everything they need to be able to start learning the game, building their list on their own time, and doing whatever they want to do. It's very nice for that. I also wanted to point out the paper that this comes on is almost like photo paper, like thickness. Like it is tough. Their individual tiny faction books are of a more durable quality than like just about any print on demand book I've bought for any other miniatures game that's Mini-Agnostic. And in addition to those, I showed off these guys. These are essentially just quick reference sheets. So if everyone got, in this case, your Norn book, you would get the Norn cards as well, and those are just more for quick reference. This is just much more convenient to keep near you during a game rather than flipping through all of this. Because of the way that like the upgrades and skills and stuff are written in here, you'll probably need this next to you when you do like upgrades back at town. But when you're playing the game, these reference sheets are a godsend. They have all your character stats, as well as the stats for all the weapons and stuff that you might want to use, a quick reminder on how combat works for everybody, as well as your list of skills and everything that makes you kind of unique unto your own faction. And there is one of these for every single one of the factions, and if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, there is one in here that is specifically for like the creatures that you would run into. Now, one thing I did want to point out here, because I do have some followers that are colorblind, if you have any kind of color blindness, you can actually go to their website and they have different versions. Like each army has like 3 or 4 variations on the colors they're printed on, so you can find something for you. And then you get a whole bunch of other stuff. Dice, again, these are going to be a mixture of your attack dice, effect dice. You have, sorry, these are like status, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, these are status things. These are your standees for all your little cardboard cutouts, as well as these little things, which I think are not terribly useful, but they do help with denoting like, the use of an action or something like that. They're just tossed in to be able to keep track of information a bit more. Honestly, these are probably the weakest part of the entire set to me, but it's there to have some nice meeples to be able to track some basic things. Me personally, I would go for, if you can still get them, the old Privateer Press status markers where you used to have like focus, or I don't know what the feral animal thing was for hordes, but basically it's tokens. It's just acrylic tokens. And then we move on to 2 books here. One is a quick start guide, which we're going to be flipping through because I want you to see what I've experienced. I played the quick start missions and everything, so we got that. And then there's the campaign rules, which is essentially the same thing, but adds in, first of all, a lot more depth as you get more exotic weapons, and effects, and you'd start generating more missions as well as upgrading your forces over time. Hope you enjoyed that. So again, remember, this is an initial impressions kind of video rather than like a review per se. I'm going to be doing a full review once I've had a chance to play the game more frequently at Adepticon. I think I have 3 games scheduled, one of them being The Pit, 2 of them being Enter Perdition. And essentially here, for those of you who watch this channel and you're more familiar with games like Warcry, we're going to kind of base it off of that, okay? I'm going to take ideas from there that are common amongst almost universal skirmish games and apply them to Witchborn, okay? There are some new mechanics that I really like, some that integrate into role-playing elements, and then there's some that are classics to skirmish games that I wanted to see more of. So in a typical skirmish game, the structure of a turn goes like this. You usually have either your hero phase or some kind of maintenance phase, whatever you want to call it, and then you go into the turn phase where you and your opponent activate your models. It's your turn. You pick a model, they get to have, usually in most games, 2 actions, kind of the action economy setup, and then your opponent goes and they activate a model and they do 2 actions, and you go back and forth until one of you runs out and until all the models on the table have been activated. Witchborn mixes this up a little bit. You see, at the start of a round, you're going to look at the table and you're going to get one of these little cubes, these little chits, for each fighter that you have on the table. Make sure they're all the same color. So I would be like red team, my opponent could be blue team. Then you're going to put all of those chits combined into a bag and randomly draw one out. You don't know if you are going or your opponent is going. This is something that exists in the game Bolt Action by Warlord Games, and I freaking love it, okay? It is one of the best wargaming mechanics out there. I don't know why more games are not pining over this. The reason is, okay, just to kind of slip this little thought in there, the reason is because instead of one side, let me back up. When you randomly determine who goes, you might be feeling very punished because your opponent keeps drawing, more and more of their chits, but what that means is late turn, when it's time for objective roundup and counter punching, because you can keep track of how many dudes have activated, that you're going to get a swarm of activations and be able to counterpunch. You cannot guarantee that when you move a unit to X location that you're going to be able to have a chance to move and kind of supplicate them with reinforcements before your opponent gets to go. It keeps both of you on edge. It's a highly reactionary type thing, and I just think it's so freaking cool. Again, because if at worst case scenario it's I go, you go, and then as those scales start to kind of churn, maybe one person's really hot, they're pulling all of their little chits out of that bag, well, now you have to think defensively because now your opponent is going to dominate the second half of the turn. But wait, we're not done yet. So you put all your chits in the bag, you roll, you randomly draw them out. If I draw my color, I get to activate a dude. That makes pure sense, okay? But here's where things get interesting. When I activate a dude, I don't get my 2 actions, like in most other skirmish games. I get 1 action. There's a whole huge list of actions of things you can do, including firing magic lightning bolts at people, shooting arrows, attacking, charging, running, all kinds of stuff, okay? But what's interesting to me is that they then double down on this mechanic, and at the end of that turn, whatever people are left, you do the chit bag randomization again, and then you do your second action. So you randomize who goes, do 1 action, randomize who goes again, and then everybody takes their second action. Now, what this means in terms of gameplay, I could have a guy run forward, okay? And my plan is I'm going to have a second dude who's reinforcing him go right up behind him. They're going to be a wonder team of just melee blenders. Well, I might not get to go immediately afterwards, so maybe my second reinforcer guy leaves the first dude out in the lurch. He gets hit, and now he has some kind of ramification that affects his second action. So when he goes to do that, now he has a new set of circumstances, again, not knowing if his buddy's going to be there. But then again, the scales do turn, so maybe you have a good run where all of a sudden all your dudes are pushing up the field and smashing forward. I will say the combat mechanics are very simple because they're more about role-playing than they are about just immediately killing swaths and swaths of dudes. So there's that aspect. There's not really a horde army per se where you're going to have the feeling of like Stormcast crashing into goblins and just deleting half the unit. No, it's not going to happen. It's much more of you're trading pieces here and there while using the environment and the objectives around. But that's interesting, and that whole situation makes up 1 game turn. You have to roll off to see who gets your first action, reset, second action, and then the third part is if anyone accrues a condition called strike last, meaning you got staggered and pushed back or whatever. Then there's a pile for strike last characters to go. So it's essentially you're breaking the I go you go with 2 action economy across a different setup, and what that does is it pulls you in different directions and adds a lot of randomization based on who goes, but not randomization in what you can do. It's a very unique setup, and I want to play it very quickly to see how fast it can really go, because like the bolt action stuff is very simple, because you do, you know, it works more like a traditional skirmish game where once you pull your little die out of the bag, you get to do all of the activations that you want to do, right? It's that unit's complete turn. But when you break that into 2 sections of action 1 and action 2 are split across that gets a bit different. Running through combat is also very, very simple. Essentially, you have a strength score. You're trying to get your strength score to be higher than whatever they're attacking, and if you do so, you get a number of dice depending on that. So if your strength is equal, you get 1 die. If it's higher, you get 2. They have these cool custom dice with all these little symbols, and I'll put the chart up here to show you what happens when you roll each symbol. But essentially, you want to get a critical hit to be able to pierce them straight into your tiny squishy organs and land a killing blow. After you hit them with that crit, you'll roll on the app, like you'll have them draw a wound, and you'll determine from there what happens to the fighter. The way a game is kind of sequenced, right, is you determine what the objectives are, you put your warbands on the field, everybody lines up, and then you start going through that turn activation thing that I mentioned before. The chits, determine who goes where, then you guys start allocating actions, and then you do it again, then strikes last. Just keep doing that over and over again while the world is changing around you, because as you are doing actions, your DM, the app, whatever you want to call it, is constantly coming up with curveballs for you and your opponent. Now again, as this is an initial thoughts video and I was not paid by them for a positive promotion like that, I do have some concerns that I'm going into Adepticon with. Again, Adepticon being where I'm going to put those thoughts and concerns into practice as I play the game. But initially looking at it, it seems like there is a mountain of special rules, that some of them seem a bit redundant. That could be trimmed down, I think, probably for a 2nd edition, but it is a really cool game. I like the mechanics. One of them is like one of the sides of these special dice is a shield. So if your person that you're attacking has a shield and you hit them there, they can deflect it. The same thing with if they have twin weapons and they can parry. There's ways to disarm opponents, so all of a sudden those special rules don't matter anymore. There's kinds of wonderful RPG elements of, like, if you think of a thing that you want to do, the rules really do exist for it. If I want to shoot an arrow and disarm opponent, there's a way to make that happen. The same thing goes for, when it comes to parry blocks, maybe going for a charge and then long bombing someone and pushing them away. All of those things, I found that most of the stuff I wanted to do as it was coming to me and I was picturing these fights was possible, but there's a lot of rules bloat to understand it. I mean, my wife and I right now are playing Pathfinder 1st edition with my brother. We've never played any Pathfinder before, and it just seems like an immense amount of bulk of wording. Even though you're only going to use a certain little tiny bit of it, it feels similar, and this game feels cumbersome when you look at the rule books. But when I started running through just a little demo of it, because I busted it out on my desk and I just kind of played through the mechanics as they were written. It plays very smoothly. I just want to try that at scale with a full warband and a full table and all that kind of stuff before I give a final review. That being said, I love the art style. Dark fantasy, to me, anything like Witchborn is cool, Conquest, what are the other one? Elden Ring, those kinds of things. I love that kind of style of fantasy horror. The real draw of this game to me, I think, is, in a strange way, its completeness. Like, if you and your friends are tired of playing AOS for a bit, right? You just want to pause and reset until the new GHB comes out. Depends on when you're watching this, of course. But if you wanted to pause and do that and play something else, but still use your models, and still, for me, using my models in any capacity motivates me to paint them. So I would love to bring this to a group and be like, hey guys, for the next, maybe it's 2 months, we're gonna try Witchborn and try it. If it's $120 for this Mamma Jamma set that has all the resources, everyone can take their own little tiny codex and their pre-generated warband for their faction, bust out their models and start using them. I mean, it's a full game, capital G game, like Age of Sigmar is a game with multiple factions and all that kind of stuff in there. It's just in one box. What's important to know is that they do also have a ton of expansions for it. So if it's a thing that your game group likes, again, low risk in terms of if everyone chips in $20, you've got an entire new game system that matches your models. And then if you throw in a couple more, I think they're like $40 for an expansion. It's a whole new set of cards and reactions and responses for the DM app, as well as rules for new encounters and missions and all that kind of. What I mean to say is low barrier to entry, highly expandable, use what models. I'm going to be doing a follow-up video to this, going into a fuller deep dive about my experiences at Adepticon regarding Witchborn. I'm very excited for the pit because, you know, the mechanics system, right, of how to do attacks and how to randomly draw, how to use your stats, all of that is very it's fairly intuitive, okay? But what I'm excited for is putting that in the setting of a bar fight, because that way everything's ridiculous. One thing that I can definitely say is sort of a con to the game, to be honest, is the size of the board. It is a big mamma jamma. You have to take over the complete kitchen table. My wife and I, we generally don't have, well, we live in small apartments like out in Seattle, so we for the longest time didn't have a table that would be anywhere near big enough to accommodate this thing. And the older I get, for some reason, the smaller game boards I want. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because I don't feel like unpacking the universe every time I have to play a game. I like stuff that's small and kind of compact. The pit as a feature is that way. It is meant to be a small game that is meant for fun and beer and pretzels, so I like that. The full game, Enter Perdition, is a monster board. So like, you know, if you have a normal game group and you guys have your big table you set up everything on, it's gonna fit in perfectly. But friends, those are my initial thoughts on Witchborn, Enter Perdition, and the pit. Again, look up for that follow-up video. I'll have it in the description or a comment pinned down below when I put it up there on this one, and I'll kind of just confirm my thoughts, kind of see what I'm thinking there as far as gameplay goes, and move on from there. So thank you so much to the folks over at Witchborn for sending this. I am truly excited about Adepticon with everything coming up. I'm a part of a few events, doing a lot of demos because I want to explore the games that are out there, and this was certainly a joy to unpack and have arrive at my door, and I do look forward to playing the pit with as many of you as I can here at Adepticon 2023. So thank you so much, and I'll catch you next time. Happy working.